So can you take your seats, please? We have an exceptional guest or exceptional guests, but one of them is more exceptional than the other, I think. So welcome Nico in this house, which you know very well. For those who do not know this, but Nico was a research fellow at CEPS a long time ago. I mean, he still remained very young, but I think it's already 20 years ago that he was with us under the patronage of Michael, working also already at that time on enlargement-related issues. And you see, you never know how the fate of your life, where it brings you, and that Moldova would be considered an accession candidate, and we would start the negotiations so rapidly, basically, yeah. And in EU history, 20 years, that's very good. So I would say congratulations to Nico, which is not only Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also Deputy Prime Minister in his country, a country which we followed over the last years in a difficult situation, certainly with this part here, which is a kind of a difficult state. But now we are clearly on the path towards membership, which I hope, let's say, will advance more or less according to expectations. So, as I said, it's a great honor for us. We had Nico here only, I think, 2 years ago. You once spoke here as well, but anyway. And then he was based here for 2 years. But it's a great honor that we have Nico here, that we can debate about this issue, and above all on this day, a historic day, that the Commission package was approved in the Commission College, then up to the European Council in December. What will happen with this, and that we can have a debate about this, which will be moderated by my colleague Tina. We're waiting for Gert Jan Koopman to arrive. I think he knows more or less, I think, what Nico will be covering. So we will start with Nico. I will listen to you attentively. But again, thank you for being with us and being with us to open this historic chapter in where the EU is heading. And let's hope the EU will fulfill its promises.
Thank you very, very much. It's actually, Thank you very, very much. Maybe I'm one of the less special guests here because I've probably done more events in this room than most of the speakers you have. And actually, I cannot imagine a better day to be here again than today, because basically my career in EU affairs started in this building when in April 2003 I was doing research for my MA paper, MA thesis at the time, and I came to see Michael, who was leading the foreign policy team here, and he was plotting to design a European neighborhood policy that is as ambitious as 2003 allowed for the EU foreign policy ambitions in Eastern Europe. And here we are, 20 years and a half later, and Moldova is receiving the recommendation to start accession talks. And of course, that makes me feel both the importance of the historical moment, the humility I have towards the historical processes that we are all witnessing, and especially, of course, me, but also makes me very conscious that many of you in this room have contributed to this. Of course, my colleagues at CEPS, Michael, Karel, at the time we had Nicholas here, Natalie Toci was here, Senem Aydin was here, Gergana was here. We have also our friends across the EU institutions who have worked day and night to keep Moldova on the right track. And really, it's an amazing place at an amazing time. You know, I finish with the big stuff, and then we go into the nuts and bolts of how we got here. And of course, we've worked very hard. We were reasonably positive and optimistic about the result of today. And we have been working day and night with the team in DGNIR and across our institutions to make sure that we get here. It was really a joint effort. As you know, Moldova has had 9 recommendations as a candidate country. And I think the result of today is the fact that we, together with the EU institutions, but the member states, basically structured the last almost a year and a half in 2 ways. We have done a lot to fulfill the 9 recommendations. As of today, we have fulfilled fully 6. And we're almost done on the other 3, but that almost is stuff that does not necessarily depend on the government, and I will elaborate on that a bit. We have also made sure that we don't lose a single second on everything else that is not the 9 recommendations. And very early in the days when we read the 9 recommendations, we adopted an internal action plan on fulfilling the 9 recommendations with 100 actions, and then we very quickly decided that the 9 recommendations don't give enough work for all the agencies and ministries. So we need to make sure that everyone has an action plan for themselves, and we came up with a parallel track of pushing things forward and accelerating Moldova's accession across the 33 policy chapters. We set up 33 working groups to match the accession chapters. We have some 600 people across the public administration in these working groups. We have been piling plans upon concepts, upon action plans to make sure that we have a very disciplined approach to pushing things forward. And just together with our friends in Digineer and Diana and Laura are here, we were counting the number of areas in which Moldova made progress. So besides the work we did on the 9 recommendations, we have also managed to make progress on 9 of the 33 policy chapters, which is good enough. We want more, but it's good enough. And some of them are really difficult chapters to make progress on. We have had progress on the energy, and I'll talk a bit more about energy later, on foreign policy and foreign and security policy alignment, on taxation, freedom of capital, and the other stuff that you normally don't read in newspapers, but constitute the nuts and bolts of the accession process. While doing that, of course, Moldova is in a very difficult place in the world at a very difficult time, a place marked brutally by Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. We have been living for over 30 years as a target of Russian destabilization attempts from even before of our independence, and of course those policies continue and have been scaled up since the aggression against Ukraine. So in the last 1.5 years, we have been, of course, severely affected by this war. And I'll give you some numbers, but before I do that, we're also very conscious in Moldova that our ability to concentrate on the 9 recommendations, on the accession chapters, on all of the reforms that are bringing Moldova into the European Union is also made possible by the fact that Ukraine defends us. The Ukrainian society, military and political leaders are defending Ukraine, but they are also defending Moldova, and that gives us the space to deal with non-military issues. The EU accession reforms, but also everything else that needs to be done and needed to be done and became much more complicated with the war in Ukraine. The impact of the war on Moldova has been very dramatic. Of course, that puts big question marks on the security of many countries, including ours. As I said, we feel confident today, of course, that Ukraine has been able to resist, and by doing so, keep the Russian troops away from Moldova. When we, as you know, we had a huge wave of refugees. Today we have some 3% of the population being refugees, but last year we had basically 1 million people coming from Ukraine through Moldova and onwards to the EU. We have that as you can imagine, had a dramatic impact on a lot of things. The economic impact was extremely negative. Last year we had -6% GDP and 32% inflation. Now we're more or less on a kind of, we might have maybe some slight growth this year. Maybe we're talking about between 0 and 1%. We've been able to decelerate the inflation to 8%. So, every new hit that we got as a result of the repercussions of the war in Ukraine is being felt, of course, in Moldova, and we've been handling it as well as we can with the limited means we have. We've had also several missile incidents with Russian missiles crossing our airspace, which of course creates major problems for a lot of things, for the security of our citizens, for the business environment. Some airlines stopped flying into Moldova, even though we still work very hard to attract more and more airlines, and it's reasonably successful. But nonetheless, nevertheless, each new kind of incident is complicating the political, the psychological, the security context in which the country operates. We've also been the target of pretty serious energy blackmail from Russia. And somehow, basically, within a matter of weeks, in last autumn, we moved from 100% dependence on Russian gas to 0% dependent on Russian gas when it comes to heating. So that happened between September and December last year. So something that hasn't been done and tackled for 30 years was done in 3 months and a half. And we really, as of September last year, we had all the gas we consumed came from Russia. And by December, we consumed 0 Russian gas for heating, though some Russian gas went into the Transnistrian region, which was then turned into electricity and resupplied to Moldova. So with this proviso, we have done this. This year, we have proceeded with unbundling and many other energy-related reforms. We've been buying also some gas through the gas acquisition platform of the EU, and here we always had continuous support from the EU. And that was last year was quite dramatic when it comes to the energy sphere, but this year already now we're pretty confident that we already have saved gas for most of the winter. So we've been working to deal with every shock that came and that basically affected Moldova as a result of the war, and not only. And we've been quite successful in diffusing some of these shocks, but then we also made sure that we had the stamina and the political discipline and administrative discipline not to be derailed by crisis, and to make sure that we invest enough time and energy in the 9 recommendations, 33 chapters, and everything that needs to be done besides dealing with the consequences of the war on us. We're also facing a pretty complicated series of hybrid attacks against Moldova. Now, again, having said this, the truth is that Moldova has been the target of aggressive Russian policies since before our independence: support for separatism, maintaining illegally Russian troops in the Transnistrian region, embargoes on goods, on wine, on fruits and vegetables, energy blackmail I mentioned. So we've been reasonably successful in resisting, in diversifying our trade links, in finding new energy sources for energy supplies, and in consolidating our democracy and path to the EU. So half jokingly, I tend to say sometimes, and sorry, Gert Jan, maybe you heard this, but it's pretty standard practice for foreign ministers to praise their countries. Actually, all of them do that, and if they don't, they are not foreign ministers. Many of them perhaps don't have many reasons to praise their countries, so that tends to somewhat undermine sometimes the credibility of what foreign ministers say. And that is why, besides what I say about Moldova, I always insist on kind of inviting everyone to go and check what others are saying. So we have been, our progress has been systematically attested by most reputable international NGOs. And we're also going and explaining all of the ratings. So just on, for example, on Reporters Without Borders, we jumped some 60 positions in the last 2 years when it comes to media freedom, on things like rule of law indexes, Transparency International, Gender Equality Index. We have an attested, proven track record of dramatic, fast, and systemic improvements on measurements of democracy, media freedom, gender equality, progress on the justice sector reform, and all of that comes in support to what we say, what the European Commission stated today as being our achievements, and that is something, again, that gives us hope that we can continue consolidating Moldova's path to the EU. Now, I mentioned hybrid attacks and Russian hostile policies, and actually what happened in the last few months was the fact that, well, in the last year especially, Russia has tried to do several things to destabilize Moldova. About a year ago, they hoped that they can support large-scale protests against the government. This failed. With the bombing of the Ukrainian electricity grid, we had a number of instances of blackouts in Moldova. That we were quite afraid that at some point there could be some synergy between, blackouts, lack of gas, and protests, and we managed to stabilize the situation, not least with help in the energy and electricity field from Romania, from Ukraine, from other partners. Then, when large-scale protests failed, oligarchs working with Russia and operating from Israel tried to train people to violently attack the police and take over public buildings. So they planned to basically take over the control of the government building with people who have been trained to do this kind of stuff. We have names. At some point, we kind of detained 80 people who are trained in Turkey for a couple of weeks to do this kind of. We derailed that. So from around summer, the new methodology was to throw a lot of cash into the Moldovan political system in the run-up to local elections. Now there's an intelligence report that is online. It's public, but it's in Romanian. It's being now translated into English. But basically, we have really a long list of methods that are working. There's some individuals, and that is all public. There are names, bank accounts, who have been paying millions of euro to mayors in Moldova as kind of sponsorship projects. So you have Russian money being parked in Kazakhstan banks and then being donated to Moldovan mayors and town halls right before the local elections. And we have a list, and it's online, as I said, of exact accounts, dates, names of who received, who initiated that, and where did the money go where. Then we have another instance where we managed to catch 2,000 prepaid bank cards issued in an Emirati bank. And with such a card, and it's more difficult to bring in cash with bags than bank cards. So what they do is that they bring cards and then they refuel these cards from abroad, and local people paid by the oligarchs in Moscow can cash out every day or every week a certain amount of money. Then at some point we caught at the border someone going linked to this political party with 550,000 euro in cash. Then there was another scheme where they were bringing in bags of cash every day under the 10,000 cash threshold, which is the legal threshold for bringing in cash into the country. So, for the scale of a country like Moldova, which is a small country, this kind of cash injections can have a really dramatic effect. But actually, if you look at the aggregate numbers, and our intelligence estimates that we're talking about around 50 million euro that have been injected into the, in the this year into supporting political players in Moldova. Actually 50 million euro is not that much for a big country. It's the price of a few missiles, actually. But of course, for a country that is small, that is a pretty dramatic number, and that kind of is several times more than all of the budgets of all of the other players. And that is really concerning, not just for the government, but also for the opposition parties, because they also kind of suddenly woke up with this injection that is completely derailing even their ability to operate. So this is where we are. But as I said, we've been reasonably good in maintaining. We've been very good at maintaining stability. We've been very good at finding alternative ways to consolidate our economic resilience, energy resilience, with DCFTA, which was also cooked here in the CEPS library in 2000.
And ex post, we also delivered ex post evaluation.
So we have been able to reorient our trade, to find new energy sources, electricity sources, and looking ahead, we're strongly confident that we can continue with the same pace. We're not alone. We get support across the board. And one more minute, if you allow me. And we've also believed strongly that it's very important for us not to be just beneficiaries, but we are and we want to be contributors. And we've been scaling up what we've been doing in terms of supporting a stronger Europe. Just this year, we sent significant, the biggest peacekeeping contribution we have to Lebanon. We had people in Kosovo who were, in the thick of the action, and some of them have been wounded. We've been working now to send more people to EU peace support operations in Bosnia, in Somalia. We wanted to send to Niger, but it's, it got derailed, that process. We actually set up a humanitarian aid and development policy instrument that from next year we hope to become donors, and of course at the beginning that will be symbolic, but nonetheless we think it's extremely important to contribute. Also being conscious that actually if you look, most of the EU countries are small or medium-sized, but by coming together, each of them with what they can, they chip in into a joint effort that makes Europe strong and stronger, and we are part of that process, and we're really proud to be someone that doesn't just benefit from help, but when we can and as much as we can contribute to that assistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for this very comprehensive overview. Moldova's achievements, and not only, also challenges, that was well noted, and I'm very happy that we also have Director General with us. We were worried we would lose you to the traffic of Brussels today, but happy to have you here, and as the Minister already told us about what it means actually for Moldova, this big day today, moving ahead on a next step. Maybe it's good if you could get us on speed what today's decision means for the European Union.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, apologies to all of you, especially Nicu, for being late, which, however, was for a good cause, I have to say. Not because I was sitting in a traffic jam. I actually took my bicycle. It took 2 minutes between the council building and the CEPS, and I broke every traffic rule on the books. But I spent most of my afternoon in the council, in the COREPER, discussing the enlargement package. I obviously cannot say what was said in the COREPER. This is a secret. But I can say that you will not be surprised to hear that there is, I think, universal recognition for the work that Moldova has done. And I also listened to what Nicu was saying about foreign affairs ministers praising themselves, even if the merits are not there. Well, I mean, you could have left it to me, because I actually wanted to praise the country. We started working together not so very long ago, and if I actually look objectively at the progress that has been achieved on the 12 steps, it is truly transformational. Oh, sorry, did I say 12? 9 steps. Truly transformational. And let me quote you a statistic which you have not heard yet. We have, of course, as good bureaucrats, tried to quantify this in a figure. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to say that 3 of the 9 haven't been completed. This is true, technically, but it's more important to know how much of the steps altogether you have completed. Now, you can argue about the precise quantification, but according to our numbers, you stand at 94%. And that is very, very important. You are the front runner beyond any doubt. So what does it mean? I mean, we have made an unequivocal proposal on opening enlargement negotiations. There are no buts, however, as conditions. There's a very clear signal. And I think it would be very surprising in light of what you have achieved and what is referenced in our documents, the country report, if that were not followed. I would be surprised. I might be proven wrong, but I would be surprised. Now, there is an important element in this process, which is that we say that because we believe that it is a merit-based process and that going so fast, because you are going incredibly fast, means that you really have to do everything in a very compressed timetable. There are some leftovers. I said 94%, so that means 6% not yet done. That 6%, we suggest, needs to be done before the Council adopts the negotiating framework. That shouldn't slow you down, because there's an awful lot of preparation for the aficionados of enlargement before you actually get to the phase where the Council can adopt the negotiating framework. But more importantly, with Moldova, we have, of course, discussed the outstanding reforms, many of which are, frankly speaking, implementation of things that are already underway. And I'm quite confident, based on those discussions, that this can be achieved in the coming months. We have given ourselves a rendezvous date in the proposal, which is March. So by March, we will report to the European Council on where these 3 outstanding reforms stand. And I will leave it to the Foreign Affairs Minister to comment on this, but I very much trust that they will be completed by then. And that means that if we do our homework in the meantime, which I am very keen to undertake, that we could actually move very fast indeed. Now, this is important because the enlargement processes that you are familiar with nowadays largely date back to the Balkans, and they have been slow and not always as productive as one would wish for. We have a process called screening, which you are aware of, which looks at the acquis and the extent to which the countries have implemented the acquis. This can go on for 2 years. We don't have time for that. We simply don't have time for that. This has to be compressed. We have to find ways of working much more efficiently. And I know that with partners in Chisinau and here in Brussels, from the Moldovan administration, we can do that. So I think the process we have gone through this last year gives me every reason to be very optimistic that actually the implementation of the enlargement process, now that we have made this recommendation, can also be much faster. And this is important because we do believe very strongly that there needs to be a sustained momentum, not just in the run-up to the negotiations, but also beyond the negotiations. So today is a vote of confidence in what the country has achieved. It's truly remarkable. I heard, as I entered, Nicu talking about the energy crisis. I heard him talking about the interference in the democratic system, both of which, you know, in our countries, in the west of Europe, alone, and any one of these factors alone would lead to a national trauma. Let us be very honest. Here they just take this in good stride. They have no choice. Countries reorienting not just its economy, but also, I think, its perspective very much on the EU. And there is a very strong support for this process from the EU. So this is a landmark moment. We have been very specific about what needs to be done to continue. And thirdly, we are offering to accelerate the process as fast as is humanly possible, as fast as Nicu can run. And with that, I think we set ourselves up for a Europe that rises to the challenge of a geopolitical world without, and I underline this, without sacrificing the merit principle. This is very important. This is the big debate that is now taking place. You want to enlarge 10 new, nine new countries that might come in. You know, is this going to be going at the expense of what the Union is all about? The answer is no. It simply means we have to work harder and smarter. And that is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Director General. This is great to know. So EU has been also learning itself from the processes, right? With Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. And you've mentioned one thing that I've noted. So screening process is too long. So that's in the pipeline to cut it down. What else is in the pipeline? If you could share with us, what else is in the EU's plan to make enlargement process more efficient and faster?
Well, I think, very practically speaking, looking ahead at the next months, we all know what needs to be done, right? The negotiating framework needs to be prepared, and the roadmaps need to be prepared, and the screening needs to be done. That should keep us busy until the summer, let us be honest. And then there are a few council decisions that need to be taken, all of which need to be taken by unanimity in the process. I mean, if we achieve all of that, we would have gone 3 times as fast as for any other country. So I'm going to concentrate on that. This would already be, I think, quite an achievement if we pull it off. Beyond that, I think there will have to be a reflection, probably for the new commission, for the next mandate, for the strategic guidelines as to how we conduct business. In my DG, I've said that we should ban the word process. Everyone talks about the enlargement process. There's such a thing as, you will not believe this, the Berlin Process Summit. Can you believe that? The Berlin Process Summit. This is actually something that was introduced. But you know, so the focus is on process, not on substance. That's my point. And we need to focus much more on substance and be more efficient. I think that, you know, will raise a lot of really big questions, not for us to answer now. We have plenty of work to do, as I said, in the coming months, but these questions will have to be answered.
So we're waiting for the next update into the EU enlargement with the new Commission. I have more questions, but I'm afraid I see the full room and I should open up for the Q&A. So I invite you all to raise your hands and pose the questions, and please also introduce yourselves. There is the microphone in the room. Sure, I see the question with Michael Emerson, our own Michael Emerson, our distinguished senior fellow from CEPS.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Emerson at CEPS. I have a question for Nicu and for Gert, if I may. But first to Nicu, on behalf of all of CEPS, I mean, really our deepest congratulations to you and, of course, your president, Maya Sandu, and a few other colleagues for what you have engineered. I mean, 10 years ago, was it, we were looking at a Moldova which was either pro-Russian President Dodon or notorious oligarch Plahotniuc, which had captured the whole of the state. And you, personally, with these few others, have dragged Moldova out of that, which is a huge and historic achievement for your country. Now, my question to you is one word that you didn't mention at all. It is Transylvania. We went there together in roughly 2008, I think. Transnistria.
Transnistria.
Yeah. Ooh, Transnistria. I mean, of course, the future there is contingent upon how the war in Ukraine ends, but surely you are thinking about how this could, at best, fit in alongside the accession process. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that. If I may put now the question to Gert Koopman. I've rapidly read the 1,000 pages that you published earlier this afternoon. And this raises two questions. One, there is a kind of slight innovation in agreeing to the opening of negotiations with Moldova and Ukraine, but also further work to be done on the conditions before a negotiating framework can be initiated with a benchmark date of March 24. Now, does that in practice mean that nothing much is going to happen? You may have an IGC, but nothing much can happen until that negotiating framework is established. Now, it's a more deeper question for you. I scanned the document very clearly for any signs that the Commission might be proposing to reform or enhance the enlargement methodology. Now, you're perfectly aware, as all of us, there's been a huge debate been going on amongst the member states and in think tanks about the inadequacy of the present methodology. I use that strong word, inadequacy, but President Macron himself is on record as saying the new methodology doesn't work. Now, you're aware that various proposals are on the table, some coming from here and other places. Does the total silence on this in the 1,000 pages mean that the Commission has no intention to make any proposals, or do you have another policy communication in preparation that we'll seal a little later on that would be more constructive on this terribly important question? Because those of us in the think tank community say quite straightforwardly, unless there is an improvement of that methodology, Moldova, Ukraine, and the Balkans Moldova and Ukraine will get stuck in the way that the Balkans are stuck. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Other questions in the room?
Hi, Stephen Sadler. I'm also DigiNear, but my question is we're here talking about the enlargement package, and that's my day job and your day job. But it's more important. What is equally important is selling Moldova's European path to the citizens of Moldova in the face of what is, frankly, and we saw this weekend with the elections, really aggressive and really well-funded Russian disinformation. And I'm interested in how we sell, and how we, when I say we, I mean Moldova and our EU support, how we sell the benefits of your European path to Moldova's citizens for future votes, and generally get democratic support for what is, frankly, cards on the table. I'm British. I know what the effect of Russian disinformation is on relations with Europe. So I'm interested in how that will work.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michael. I'm an Erasmus student from Moldova. Actually, I'm a Moldovan citizen. And first of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude toward Mr. Popescu for your diplomatic efforts on this very difficult way of Moldova for Euro integration. And my question is, if you know, at these local elections, Moldova faced something that it has never known in its history. The Russian like politicians or Russia in general wanted to buy our elections, literally. And in your opinion, in the future, how Moldova can really find some methods to combat this? And if there are some collaborations in this sense with the European security organizations? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we can proceed with answering. Minister, you have 3 questions, so maybe we start with you.
Okay.
Transnistria.
The Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova. So, you know, the next step, I started by saying that my career in EU affairs started in April here, 2003. But the second step was actually Michael and the team and Elena coming to Moldova. I think it must have been early July 2003. And this is when the team, and led by Michael, was digging and was preparing a book called Europeanization and Conflict Resolution, to which I later contributed. And of course, that situation and the interplay between these two processes remain something that hasn't been solved. And it's not an easy process. It's of course much more easy to proceed with reforms, economic modernization, border controls, attracting investors if you don't have a separatist conflict. Now the reality is that we still have this separatist conflict. For more than 30 years it hasn't been solved. At the same time, we are very clear in Moldova that we cannot just wait and put the rest of the country at the whim and at the speed of this process that hasn't been solved in the last 30 years. So our approach is to say and believe that we have a few years before we join the EU, and we want to invest this time in reintegrating the country. Of course, the parameters of that question depend a lot on what happens in Ukraine and by what timeline, and what the dynamic is. And of course, any step that Ukraine takes to liberate its territory is also something that changes the context in a way that makes it easier to settle this conflict peacefully. We also strongly insist and believe that the only way to solve it is peaceful, and it's very clear, and there's a clear commitment on both sides of River Dnistru, between the government in Chisinau and the separatist authorities, to keep the way forward peaceful. So for all the disagreements that we had, for all of the unsolved conflict that we have, in the last year and a half, there's been constant dialogue, and in really, really dangerous moments when things could have derailed, there was a clear commitment on both sides of River Dnistru to keep things between us and peaceful, and no matter how difficult, negotiate. And you know, I have my colleague, Vice Prime Minister for Reintegration. He's been going there. He's been like more than a dozen times in the last year. There's constant dialogue, talking on the phone, meeting, VTC, with a clear commitment to manage our differences locally and insulate them as much as we can from what is going on. Looking ahead, the truth is that it's hard to predict. It's impossible to predict how things will go. So we have our eyes on consolidating our path towards the EU. It's clear legally we are one country. All the benefits of European integration are open to the residents of the Transnistrian region. And the plan is to basically bring them along with us. And it's not just the plan, it's something that has been happening. 90% of them have Moldovan passports, they can travel visa-free. Most of the companies from the region are registered as Moldovan legal entities, and they export to the EU under the deep and comprehensive free trade area regime, which helped us plug them into the benefits of the European integration process. So the plan and the hope is by doing more of the same, we can gradually unlock this situation that has been stalled in multiple ways for many years. Citizens and public opinion. Yes, of course, that's something that is clearly a delicate issue. At the same time, and Michael, you mentioned Plahotniuc and Dodon, and before that was Voronin. Actually, Moldova has a proven track record of some leaders coming to power, trying to consolidate an autocratic system, or trying to move the country away from the EU, and all of them failed. All of them lost elections in 2-3 years later. None of them managed. Dodon did not manage and didn't even try to denounce the association agreement, and partly because the country has been structurally tied to the European space much more than actually all the other countries. Some of it is our geography. We don't have a direct border with Russia. This means different things for military security, but also for trade links, the cost of transportation. There's the Romanian element. We speak Romanian, we have the acquis in Romanian, the Romanian dimension of Moldova is something that is a stronger anchor. So, whereas, yes, today the polls say around 60% of the people support European integration. I'd like it to be more. Of course, but at the same time, several times there have been made attempts to derail that, and all of the politicians who tried that lost. Looking ahead, I'm quite confident we'll stay the course with domestic support. Now, when it comes to disinformation, I would like to, because very often when you say hybrid warfare or hybrid tactics in Europe, people suddenly think about disinformation and cyber, maybe. Our experience of hybrid war is that this is just a small part of it, because a lot of it is cash, a lot of it is bank cards, a lot of it is buying up mercenary journalists, a lot of it is paying salaries to politicians who overnight get elected just because they are distributing cash to voters. And that is why, please, when you hear hybrid, don't reduce it just to Facebook and Twitter. The other stuff is actually much more worrying and much more dangerous. Now, you said, yes, we face an unprecedented level of pressure on this kind of dirty financing front. The truth is that in the last 1.5 years, we have faced a lot of firsts, negative firsts. The first, largest scale war since World War II on European soil. We faced refugees, electricity blackouts caused by Russian bombings in Ukraine, gas supplies being cut just overnight. And we have found solutions to electricity supplies, to gas supplies, to managing refugee flows. I mentioned Russian missiles. We're now strongly investing in air surveillance and air defense, and we're doing it with the European partners, and we get help from through the European Peace Facility, but also bilaterally. So we really have a dozen of difficult, tough, brutal firsts that we have successfully managed. So yes, now we look at another first with unprecedented injections of cash, and I'm sure that together we will continue being able to shoot down this type of pressures, and being very focused on, what is the next invention around the corner that will be used to try and complicate our situation. But, and every time we do this, we know that help is one text message away. And the response time for Gert Jan, for any commissioner or any minister, is that when we have something, within minutes, we get a response, and we get a strong desire and engagement to look for a solution for any problem we have. And every time we manage to weather out the new storm, we did so together, and we're extremely grateful, and everyone knows this in Moldova.
Thank you so much. Director General, the question of Michael about EU enlargement.
Yes, no, very good question. Maybe just on communication, that's indeed an important point. It's more for Nicu to say, but I think it's also for us in the Commission. You know, we do these things, but how do we communicate them, and how do we communicate them in the country? One of the examples, which I think is, you know, subject to your feedback, is probably a good way to look at is what we do in terms of energy support, where we're actually in this very difficult period subsidizing household bills, and this is actually visible on the individual bills. So if you're a citizen and you are paying high energy prices, you can see what the EU is actually contributing to making your living standards a little bit more bearable. Now that's pretty extreme, but I think we need, in these times, given everything that Nicu was telling about hybrid warfare and beyond, we need to be very bold in the way we communicate. On the methodology, don't get me wrong. There are two things. What I was saying is that up until the summer of next year, we will go at breakneck speed within the existing methodology, where there are a number of things that need to happen in any event before we can really start in earnest. That's the screening process, which I've said we want to compress. That's the preparation of the roadmaps for the fundamentals, which will have to be done, and the preparation of a negotiating framework, the preparation. So how do I see this? Well, these are what we have done today is we've made a proposal to the European Council. So that will need to be decided on the 15th of December. If the European Council, as I expect, upholds our recommendation, then we will dispatch, sorry Diana, colleagues to Chisinau on the 15th of December. So and the same is true for Ukraine, by the way. We have no time to lose, no time to lose. So all of this preparatory work, which is a precondition for actually getting the machine running, will be done much faster than it has been done before. And I must say that the answer is not, I think, for this phase to reinvent the process. I was in DG Budge as Director General when the COVID crisis hit, and our president wanted to buy vaccines. For this, I was advised by the technical colleagues that it would take between 3 and 6 months if we used all the fast procedures. In the end, we did it in 2 weeks. Because if you really want to use the procedures efficiently, you can use the procedures efficiently. I don't really understand why screenings should take 2 years. Honestly, I think we should find a way of doing this much more quickly to have synergies across candidate countries. And therefore, I believe this first phase is really not going to be very much affected by big discussions about the methodology. But what I also said was that there will have to be, and there I agree with you, Michael, there will have to be a discussion about the methodology. The methodology is designed as a staple chase where there are simply too many hurdles over which you can stumble, and that is a little bit what we see going forward. But that's not the discussion we want to have now. For this, I think there needs to be proper preparation. There needs to be a legitimate mandate from the European Council, and there needs to be a discussion ahead of a legislature that is going to be empowered to do things a little bit differently. So I don't want to speculate about that now. The only thing I'm saying is that this clearly will need to be addressed. We have some ideas. The think tank community has put lots of ideas on the table, so we will definitely inspire ourselves on some of these ideas. But now is the time to double down on what we need to do and to make it happen really, really fast, because that is in the interest of the candidate countries. One last point. A big theme in all of these debates revolves around gradual integration. Now, I think Nicu already mentioned DCFTA. I hadn't realized it was invented here in the CEPS library. That's giving a lot of credit to CEPS, right? But DCFTAs and what we want to do with our Western Balkans growth plan, in other words, opening up the internal market progressively to candidate countries, provided, obviously, they take the relevant bits of the acquis on board early, is a form of gradual integration. So a lot of these things are actually, in my view, already happening. They're happening sometimes too successfully. If you look at what's happening with Ukrainian grain, you see that this integration, full integration actually in the internal market actually is providing some adjustment problems, not for the country, but for the EU. So I think the theme of gradual integration is there. We're making proposals for the Western Balkans to catch up with the trio in the East. We've just done that today as well. And there's a much bigger debate about how the enlargement methodology should work, how the decision-making process in the Council should work, how many decisions actually need to be taken. I don't really understand why we need to have so many decisions by unanimity on every single step. There's a whole cottage industry that has grown out of OBAs and these sort of abbreviations. No normal human being knows what they mean. I think all of that can probably be simplified, but now is the time actually to do the hard work, the preparatory work, and as I said, with Nicu, I'm sure we can do that very quickly.
And Director General, you mentioned Western Balkans to catch up with Ukraine and Moldova, and you see that with these processes which we have, they will go faster. This is the expectations now.
Indeed, I think honestly, what we see in the Western Balkans is that there has been a lot of cynicism. Because as the joke goes, they were pretending to reform, and we were pretending that we wanted to have the accession process moving forward. That was actually spelt out quite explicitly by the previous president, the former president of the Commission, who said that we didn't really want to do much by way of enlargement. So there's a lot of cynicism in the region, a lot of concern that we don't mean it, and I think also the reform pace has been too slow. Some of the countries have stagnated, some of the countries have lost their way a little bit. But over the past year, we have seen that the example of what's happening in the East and the momentum around enlargement more generally has remotivated them. The growth plan of the Western Balkans has a very simple idea behind it, which is that the hard reforms that can actually both provide more economic benefits if they're implemented and accelerate the accession process, that those we need to prioritize. Not formally in terms of the accession process, but the idea of the growth plan is that we provide a next generation EU model, a model where you have ex ante conditionality, where you pay for reforms, but you define the hard reforms beforehand, and you do the reforms and then you get rewarded. That model, I think, is needed to repair some of the damage done over a very long period in the Western Balkans. So we have an answer for that as well in the enlargement package. Now, the trio in the East has started so recently and has not suffered from that reform fatigue. Maybe it will still come. I'm sometimes a bit worried about the health of the colleagues on the other side, given the pace at which they work. But for now, I think the East is moving ahead, more rapidly, and that is a good thing. I also believe that a bit of competition in the group of countries that are exceeding, and a bit of inspiration, let me use that word instead of competition, a bit of inspiration can be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Director General. I'm afraid we are soon running out of time, but I still want to ask you a final question, which will have a very brief answer. And I'll start with the Minister. Minister, when would you expect, as these things stand now, and as we have a very high speed, when would you expect Moldova to become the member of the European Union?
Well, the objective is clearly stated, first by our President Maia Sandu, which gave us the task to bring the country into the EU by 2030. And then the same date has been used multiple times by the presidents of the European Commission and the European Council. So here, the foreign minister does not have much power to change a clearly set date by the leadership of both the EU and Moldova. We have a lot of work to do. We're all very conscious. There's lots of legal acts, lots of real-life adjustments. For us, the understanding is the only way to get in is a merit-based process where we do every single step that is necessary. We're not a big country. We won't change EU procedures and methodology. The only way for us is to use this corridor, no matter how narrow or uncomfortable it is, because that's the only way we'll get into the EU, and this is what we're focused on, and within this, we're trying to accelerate as much as we can.
Thank you very much. And Director General, this is the date for everybody standing in line, including Western Balkans?
Well, you have heard my president emphasizing the merit-based principle all the time. I don't think that my president has mentioned 2030. There's another president who mentioned 2030. As I said, we are keenly aware of the geopolitical necessities. We're keenly aware of how hard colleagues in the acceding countries work. And we are today actually documenting the pace of reform, which is very, very high. I don't think there's been in history such a fast pace of reform. So, I think these dates that are bandied around are realistic if the process is upheld. And I don't think it is written anywhere that there needs to be a big bang for all 9 together. I think that would be a mistake. I see it personally, but this is a personal view, much more as a race to the top. So, clearly we're not going to have individual countries entering every year. That doesn't just seem very practical, but we could have groups of countries entering if they're ready and when they're ready.
Thank you very much. I think this is on this we shall basically wrap up, and thank you both for being with us despite your very busy agendas. Let me also thank you everybody present in the room to contribute with your insights to our debates, and also special thanks to the Moldova's ambassador to the EU, Ms. Daniela Morari, who is kindly inviting us all on Moldovan wines, which we will be happy to host here at CEPS, and also we can stand together and cheer for Europe, bigger and stronger. Thanks.